As soon as the museum's massive wooden doors closed behind me, I felt something stirring in the air. It was as if the building exhaled a sigh of relief at another visitor stepping into its domain. The gloom of dusk had settled over the city, casting long shadows across the marble floors. My footsteps echoed in the great foyer, dwarfed by the cavernous ceilings. The flickering lamps on the walls, spaced at careful intervals, offered only a tremulous illumination, where paintings with eyes that followed me across the room loomed on either side, each with the stern visage of lords and ladies from centuries past. Standing there, I sensed that the night ahead would be anything but ordinary. I had volunteered for the museum's newly launched Night Watch program, hoping a few hours wandering these halls would help me appreciate the exhibits and maybe uncover some hidden stories for my research. The idea was straightforward. The museum needed watchers to ensure no one broke in and that nothing was disturbed under cover of darkness. In exchange, I could browse the collections after closing. The arrangement seemed ideal. I was a historian, fascinated by rumored secrets, so I savored the quiet mysteries that might unravel when the public was gone. A short, older curator named Mrs. Greenwood greeted me with a polite bow of her head, her round spectacles flashing under the overhead lamp. She handed me a large ring of keys that jingled merrily despite the somber atmosphere. "These will open the restricted sections," she explained. "We've had consistent trouble with break-ins near the older wings, but we haven't been able to catch the culprit. Strange noises and displacements of artifacts have been reported as well." Her voice trembled slightly, though her face remained a mask of strict professionalism. "Remember, do not venture beyond the storage corridor in the basement. That area is strictly off-limits." Something in her tone suggested that it had less to do with museum regulations and more to do with personal dread. "Why not?" I asked, turning the keys over in my hand. She hesitated, her slight frame stiffening with an unspoken worry. "You'll understand in time," she said quietly, evading. "It's closed to everyone. That's all you need to know for now. Just be cautious." And with that, she left me alone, the ring of keys dangling from my belt. I spent the first few hours of the shift wandering the labyrinthine corridors, occasionally pausing to admire a painting here or an ancient sculpture there. Once visitors were gone, their whispered awe replaced by yawning stillness, these artifacts took on a ghostly quality. The painted figures grew watchful. The sculptures seemed poised to shift under my gaze, by imagination, I told myself. But the silence came alive with the possibility that old relics could hide secrets far older than recorded history. Around midnight, I found myself near the Greek and Roman wing. The golden lamplight illuminated busts of ancient philosophers and warriors in delicate glass cases. Columns carved to evoke a sense of classical wonder lined the walkway, casting slender shadows across the marble. And that was when I heard it. A soft, distant wail so faint I thought it might be a trick of my ears. It sounded like a hushed lament, a voice in pain. I froze, scanning my surroundings. The corridor was empty aside from the silent statues. Yet there it was again, an echo of anguish. Each step I took forward seemed to amplify the cry, drawing me closer. Something propelled me onward until I arrived at a tall archway that opened onto a narrow, descending staircase. This was not a public area. The sign overhead read "Storage," and I remembered the curator's caution. My curiosity waged war with her warning. But the haunting sound kept prodding me. Perhaps an intruder had wandered down there, or maybe an injured animal seeking refuge. Rationalizing it as part of my responsibility, I took a resolute breath and began my descent. The steps spiraled, stretching deeper than I expected. The air around me grew increasingly cold, carrying with it a tangible sense of dread. My mind conjured images of catacombs beneath ancient European cities, crypts lined with bones. The dark pressed in, thick and unrelenting, until I fumbled for a small flashlight. Its beam cut through the gloom, revealing an unfinished corridor with cinder-block walls and dusty floors. Doors flashed in and out of visibility like phantoms as I moved the flashlight. Then I saw a faded sign on one of the doors. Hall of Acquisitions. I pressed my ear to the thick wood. Silence. I tried the handle, but it was locked. My key ring jangled, but none of the keys looked like they would fit such an old, rusted lock. Perhaps that wasn't the origin of the noise, I thought. I continued onward until I found another door deeper in the corridor, smaller, inconspicuous, half hidden behind crates. It looked older still, with rotted wood and a padlock so large it appeared medieval. When I drew closer, my flashlight glinted off something etched into the wood, a series of symbols reminiscent of runes or wards. My heart began to hammer, though I couldn't name why. To my surprise, I found a heavy skeleton key on my ring that appeared a likely match. It slid into the padlock with an unsettling ease. The rusted mechanism squealed in protest but relinquished its hold. I braced my shoulder against the ancient door, which finally gave way with a groan that reverberated down the corridor like an omen. Inside was a small set of steps leading lower, into what felt like a time capsule. The walls were lined with creaking shelves that displayed objects of uncanny variety: carved masks, ornate daggers, handmade dolls with eyes deeply set in sorrowful wooden faces. Each artifact bore an aura of age beyond measure, almost twisting the air around it into something heavier. The smell was of stale earth and rotted wood, a tomb-like stench that wrapped itself around me. I wasn't alone. There was a figure, half obscured by shadows, hunched over a low table. A single lantern cast a weak, trembling pool of light. The figure lifted its head, revealing the drawn face of a man with deep-set eyes and skin almost the color of parchment. He stared at me in horror, as if I were an apparition. I froze, uncertain whether he was a guard, an intruder, or something else entirely. I began, but my words died in my throat as the man lunged forward with unexpected speed. His eyes bulged in panic more than aggression. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed. "You'll ruin everything." I stumbled backward, colliding with the table behind me. A bronze chalice wobbled precariously on its edge. "Ruin what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Who are you?" He exhaled, pressing trembling fingers to his temples. "I'm Carter, one of the curators. People think I left weeks ago, but I couldn't without finishing the job. Please, you must go. There are souls here that cannot be set free if we don't. Maintain the spell." His eyes pleaded with me, yet I couldn't tear mine away from the artifacts. From the quiet dread they emitted, an unnatural hush clung to them. A hush that seemed to hold unspoken screams imprisoned. I glanced at a tall mirror standing in the corner. Its face was murky, yet it revealed fleeting shapes behind my reflection. Tortured forms writhing in silence. My heart battered against my ribs. "What's happening here?" I asked, forcing my gaze away from the horrifying illusions. Carter stepped aside, revealing a carved wooden chest on the table. It was open, and inside there was an obsidian figurine shaped like a woman in torment, her mouth open in a silent wail. "Their souls are bound to these artifacts," he said. "It was done centuries ago by collectors who wanted to preserve the essence of those they captured. Scholars, travelers, enemies. They believed harnessing souls in objects gave them influence over knowledge, power, even immortality. The museum acquired many of these items unknowingly across decades, from estate donations and shadowy auctions. But now that the wards are weakened, these stolen souls are stirring, though I'd heard tales of cursed objects. I never believed them to be more than folklore. The look in Carter's eyes said otherwise. But the museum? They had no idea? He let out a low, humorless laugh. "Some do know, or at least suspect. This hidden chamber was designed to contain the items, keep the energies sealed away. But everything is unraveling. The souls are getting restless, and when they cry out, they do more than just make noise. They try to call others, lure them here so they can break free." A surge of fear seized me as I remembered the faint wail that drew me to this basement. I realized with dread that it wasn't a mere coincidence. The cry was an invitation, an irresistible call. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment the shadows around the shelves seemed to shift. I thought I saw human faces in them, contorted with agony. Carter slammed the chest shut, as if to block out the intangible moans. "Help me," he rasped, sweat trickling down his brow. "We can't let the souls escape. They'll destroy themselves and anyone nearby. We must renew the binding." That's what I've been trying to do, but it requires a ritual, an alignment with the old rites. I lack the final relic to complete it. We need an amulet that was last stored in the West Wing archives. Bring it to me, and we might seal this evil once more. I looked at him, uncertain. How can I trust you? How do I know you're not the danger here? His eyes, filled with desperation, told me enough. True or not, I had already ventured too far to abandon this place's dark secret. If the souls were indeed trapped and enraged, leaving them at liberty to roam didn't seem like a safer alternative. With my mind set, I hurried back up the winding steps, Carter's instructions echoing in my head, an amulet in a glass case labeled Unknown Celtic Relic, hidden among the lesser-known antiquity. The museum's main halls felt different after what I had seen. The shadows stretched hungrily. Corners pulsated with an unnatural hum. At one point, I passed by an African tribal mask behind glass, its empty eyes fixated on me. I could have sworn, in that half-second glance, that it whispered a guttural greeting, as though the soul sealed within recognized me. My pace hastened, the ring of keys clanking against my hip like a panicked heartbeat. When I arrived at the West Wing, the atmosphere was no less foreboding. I followed the plan Carter had given me. Locate the corridor with Celtic artifacts. Find the glass case. The overhead lights flickered, painting a strobing pattern upon the ancient runes etched on stone pillars. It was easy to see why visitors seldom lingered here. The collection had an ominous air, even by daylight. At last, I found the case. Inside was a circular medallion, shaped from a dark metal, inscribed with swirling lines that resembled a labyrinth. A single black gemstone gleamed at its center, scrawled with an emerald vein that shone sporadically, like a tiny lightning storm captured in stone. Next to it, a plaque read, "Origin uncertain, presumed, Celtic ritual, peace." I tried the keys, and surprisingly, one opened the glass cabinet with a crisp click. I reached for the amulet, and that was when one of the overhead lights shattered. Glass rained down, and I reflexively shielded my face. In that split second, any normal museum hush was obliterated by a crescendo of disembodied cries. I felt them more than heard them, a tidal wave of sorrow and rage emanating through the corridors. Each exhibit seemed to lend its voice to the unholy chorus. My skin erupted in goosebumps, my blood cold as ice. I staggered back, gripping the amulet tight, desperate to flee. As I turned, I glimpsed a swirl of black shapes coalescing at the far end of the corridor. They formed vague outlines, a mass of drifting specters that flickered in and out of existence. Some had faces twisted beyond human recognition. Others loomed as half-formed shadows. Their collective despair was suffocating. The moans were no longer faint. They surrounded me in a cacophony of silent howls, felt in my very bones. I struggled to catch my breath. "Stop!" I yelled, though my voice was lost in the swirling mass of sorrow. My heart hammered as I sprinted away, the gloom departing at my back. Their presence pursued me, an armada of trapped souls bridging the space between worlds. I clamped my hand around the amulet as I dashed blindly down passages I only half remembered. The path became a labyrinth, corners shifting in impossible angles. The building, or whatever spirit within it, was trying to keep me from returning to Carta, trying to ensure these souls would never be bound again. Yet, I refused to yield. I found a familiar hallway, racing through the Greek exhibit back to the winding stairwell. As I descended into the catacombs once more, the temperature plummeted. My breath emerged in frosty puffs, and the walls seemed coated with a thin layer of hoary frost. Somewhere behind me, the swarm of ghosts or souls was approaching, whispering curses in unknown tongues. I could feel the heaviness of centuries pressing in from all sides. At last I burst into the hidden chamber where Carter stood amid the relics. He had cleared a large stone panel on the floor, revealing a circle of strange symbols that glowed faintly in the lantern light. "You have it," he gasped, relief evident in his wide eyes. I handed him the amulet with trembling fingers. His hands clutched it as if it were the final hope in a doomed world. "We haven't much time." Together, we arranged the artifacts in a ring, following a pattern that Carter insisted was the only way to realign the wards. It felt primal, older than any written history. He poured a dark, viscous liquid around the circle. The stench of iron and decay made me queasy. My mind reeled with the knowledge that what we enacted belonged to a realm of magic and curses beyond historical fact, yet it was impossibly real. "They're here," Carter whispered, flinching at a wave of shrieks reverberating from the doorway. The faint light of the lantern revealed the corridor outside, teeming with writhing shadows that threatened to spill in. "I'll start the incantation. You must stand guard within the circle. If they breach it, all is lost." My nerve wavered. The idea that I could defend us against an onslaught of enraged spirits seemed laughable, but Carter's desperation propelled me. My hands shook as I lifted a staff he had placed in my grasp. It was carved from aged wood and topped with a tarnished metal orb, etched in swirling Celtic symbols similar to those on the amulet. Carter began chanting in a language I couldn't recognize. The syllables were harsh and guttural, echoing off the chamber walls. The circle of artifacts flickered with an otherworldly luminescence. The amulet glowed in his hands, tendrils of energy swirling around it like green serpents. Outside the circle, the swirling mass of souls advanced, pressing closer to the threshold. They writhed in inhuman shapes, moaning soundlessly, pushing against an invisible barrier. Within this bizarre half-light, I glimpsed shifting faces reveal themselves, one after another. Men, women, even children, each contorted by unending torment. They reached with claw-like fingers, hungry to reclaim the life they had been denied. A suffocating despair bled into the chamber. My mind felt battered by waves of sorrow. I tightened my grip on the staff, tears springing to my eyes as the resonance of their pain battered my senses. At one moment, a specter in tattered medieval garb lunged forward, its severed mouth stretching in a voiceless scream. The staff in my hands glowed faintly, and I jabbed it toward the apparition. It recoiled with a hiss, swirling back into the tapestry of phantasms. Another specter lurched from my left, almost brushing through my arm. The staff's orb flickered and pulsed, repelling it. Carter's incantation grew louder, more forceful. His voice reverberated in the chamber, the chant coalescing into a single tone that felt like it could rip open the air itself. The circle brightened, each artifact humming with energy. Suddenly, the souls outside shrank back, as though some unseen power mesmerized them. One by one, they twisted and shriveled, drawn into the relics that once held them prison. It was a horrifying spectacle, as if they were being chained all over again, sucked into their inanimate vessels. They writhed, struggled, but the pull was relentless. My heart thundered painfully. Was locking these souls back in captivity truly the right thing, or was it a necessary evil to prevent greater chaos? Their faces, how could I forget their pain? Yet Carter pressed on, sweat pouring down his brow, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. He, too, recognized the cruelty, but it had been done centuries before our time. Without the knowledge to free them properly, or guide them to some peaceful rest, there seemed no choice. When the ceremony reached its apex, the room vibrated with an almost deafening thrum. Carter placed the amulet at the center, raising his voice in the final words of the incantation. As the last syllable left his lips, a thin bolt of light arced from the amulet, striking each artifact in turn. The phantasms disappeared in a flash of swirling shadows. The oppressive cold vanished, replaced by a suffocating stillness that seemed to last indefinitely. For a moment, my body felt weightless, my mind untethered. Then, with a jolt, everything snapped back to normal. The warmth of the lantern's light returned, and I could breathe again. Carter slumped to the floor, the amulet clattering from his hand. My pulse still pounded in my ears, but I rushed to check on him. He was conscious, though exhausted, murmuring incoherently. It took him several moments to form words. "It's done," he said hoarsely. "They're locked away again." He closed his eyes, shoulders trembling. If there was a way to free them gently, give them peace, I'd do it, but we don't know how. The old rites are lost. All that's left is this monstrous solution. I helped him stand. Around us, the artifacts sat silent and still, the hush of centuries restored. It was eerie how ordinary they looked now, as if lifeless lumps of wood, stone, and metal. No wails, no shifting shadows at the edge of sight. Yet the memory of the swirling souls clung to the air, and a lingering dread whispered that this victory was only temporary. Beneath these quiet shapes, suffering endured, trapped in the museum's secret heart. "We must seal the door," Carter said. "Return the wards. Keep this place hidden. The items need to remain undisturbed." Though none of us said it aloud, we both knew it was only a matter of time before curious minds chiseled away at the secret again. Evil artifacts rarely stay buried, especially in a place that thrives on collecting history. But in that moment, with dawn mere hours away, sealing the chamber was the best we could do. We replaced the door's padlock, re-hid it behind the crates. Carter promised to remain behind, to do his best to keep watch on these objects, to ensure the wards didn't fail again. Though he looked worn and haunted, a flicker of determination shone in his eyes. "Go," he urged me. "Go back upstairs. You were never here." I paused at the threshold. What if the curator asks? Mrs. Greenwood might suspect something. His reply was as calm as the tomb we stood in. "Tell them you heard an intruder but found nothing. Show them no proof. If the museum staff truly wants to remain ignorant, they would be relieved at your empty hands." With reluctance, I left him there, ascending the spiral staircase. Each step pulled me away from the heavy darkness below, yet some part of that gloom remained within me, like a phantom echo. The corridors upstairs felt strangely bright, almost too welcoming in the fluorescent light. Dawn was close, and the museum's security staff were already stirring. Mrs. Greenwood was waiting in the foyer as I emerged, looking anxious. "Is everything all right? I thought I heard noises," she said, her voice tight. Her gaze flicked over me, searching for any sign of trouble. I offered a half-smile. "I heard something too. I looked around but found nothing. Must have been the old building settling." She studied me in silence for a moment, as though debating whether to believe me. At last she nodded, and a small measure of relief softened her features. "You should get some rest," she said gently. "Thank you for your service tonight. We appreciate it." Then she turned to greet the incoming day staff. I watched them file in, yawning, exchanging pleasantries. They had no idea what horrors lurked in the hidden recesses below their feet. Exiting the museum into the pale light of early morning, I felt as though I had stepped between worlds. The bustling city was beginning to awaken, the sound of traffic and conversation, an odd contrast to the silence that clung to my skin like a second layer. In the distance rose the museum's proud facade, solemn herrings of statues, an elegant reminder of humanity's ancient heritage. But now I knew some secrets were best left sealed. As I turned onto the sidewalk, the first rays of sunlight glinted off the high windows, and a faint wind caught the edges of my jacket. Under that morning sky, I walked away, feeling the weight of centuries bearing upon me. I heard no voices, no moan. Perhaps, for the moment, the stolen souls slumbered in their prison of artifacts. Yet, I couldn't forget the swirl of shadows, the half-formed faces contorted in agony. Nor could I ignore the hush that might erupt again into cries if ever the wards failed. The museum's chorus of silent screams was quiet for now, hidden beneath polished floors and curated displays. But in the darkness below, locked away from the public eye, countless souls endured a living death, yearning for a freedom that time forgot. And I carried their story with me, a knowledge that will haunt me in every quiet museum, in every artifact that stares with blank eyes. It's the same chill that creeps up my spine whenever I pass by a relic of an unknown past. It's a reminder that history can be more than stone and paint. Sometimes it holds lost lives and stolen souls, echoing in the silence of locked chambers. And perhaps, one day, those echoes will be heard again.